I invite the second speaker. The Institute of Historical Studies is happy to commence its usual academic work, and the current program is a webinar on Gandhi's peace efforts. The main speaker of this webinar is Professor Kamlesh Mohan of Punjab University, Chandigarh, and the chair for this session is Professor Sumit Mukherjee of Kalyani University. I have already introduced these two speakers, but they are well known in their respective fields. Both of them belong to political science and history, and they are specialists on Gandhian studies. The thrust of this particular webinar is to show that in a world of war and not much peace, this topic has become relevant in this anniversary year on Gandhi. The success of Gandhi's peace efforts was surprising, and somehow or other he set the ball rolling in this special field, and gradually it took on the imagination of the reading public, and Gandhi had become an iconic figure all over the world within a short period. Peace is a desideratum today. Gandhi demonstrated through his political activities that peaceful methods like non-cooperation and non-violence ultimately stayed, became successful, particularly in India's freedom struggle. They became more or less synonymous for peace. His argument there was that a disarmed nation against an armed authority would only succeed through peaceful means and not by war. War could be subdued by counter war, but peace was a unique thing which could be cowed down by brute force, by any kind of authority. He had already demonstrated that in South Africa, where he took up the cause of the black people, both Indian and African. Back at home, he pursued that well-known track, and in all cases, whether it is Salt Satyagraha or Chori Chora or the other important movements he had led, his efforts were eminently successful and ultimately responsible for our independence. Because we are unable to establish connection with a speaker from Punjab, so I invite Professor Sumit Mukherjee to speak first and wait for her later. So,
Sir, madam.
Hello?
Madam,
Yes, she has
madam,
joined.
again, please.
Once again. She has joined. She has joined.
Madam, madam, please mute your speaker. It is unmute already. You take some help from others.
I have said all that, I can't wait anymore. All these things are done. She says she has done.
Come. Madam, come. Yes.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah. Madam,
Yeah.
speak
I don't see her at all. Oh, yeah, she has come. Right. Now I can see not her picture, but actually her name is now visible.
Okay.
Okay, I invite you, Professor Mohan, to inaugurate this webinar and be the keynote speaker this afternoon. So I request Professor Mohan to speak on the theme, peace efforts of Mahatma Gandhi. So on that, please carry on.
Thank you,
Go on
Dr.
speaking.
Thank,
Hello. Okay. Okay.
thank you, Professor Palit, for inviting me to speak on Gandhi. And I think, participating in a webinar, uh, it's a different kind of experience. One doesn't feel nervous because one can't see the audience. So it seems as if one is speaking to oneself only. I recall when I was speaking in Johannesburg, I felt a little nervous. The embassy has arranged a talk because so many people were there, not just from one nationality, but from various nationalities. So I was just wondering how Gandhiji, after 150 years, still he resonates with the people, and I try to understand what makes his appeal so universal and even after such a long time. Uh, One of the important things which I would like to recall is
Yeah.
that it was at Johannesburg Mahatma Gandhi had started his career and he had started understanding the meaning of non-violence. Perhaps a picture which shows the station of St. Marisburg where he was thrown out from a compartment where the white people were sitting, and I think Madhul has that picture and he can show it how humiliated he felt. But one important thing about him was I can only see Professor Palit. I can't see anybody else. So Professor Palit, so you are a constant presence. In fact, I think you are replacing while I am
I don't
listening.
know. There are two. Okay, you carry on. I can hear you also. Apart from seeing your lovely face, I can also hear you.
Okay. So,
Carry on.
uh, no, one important thing which really struck me when I saw that station, St. Peter's, Marisburg, and also I went to the office where had published his Indian opinion, that particular newspaper. What struck me was that Gandhi, from the right beginning, he felt that his inferiority was because of his color. So he understood that this was a racial inequality and he had to overcome that. So that was his first lesson in understanding the new methodology of non-violence itself. Now, one important thing that I would like to bring to the notice of the virtual audience is that that this color difference or racial inequality had not made Gandhi feel inferior, and he kept on saying to himself that he was not inferior, he would be able to get his status as soon as possible. No, it always it always was a problem. I tried to figure it out. How did he get his method? How did he evolve his technique, etc.? How did he build up his trust in non-violence itself? Now, he had tried to connect the reform process that he was an upper caste and he had uh, borrowed something from history, that is, they believe in non-violence, but he did not uh, in the kind of non-violence that they would go against. differentiate between, they exploit others, but they would not let that an insect come to them. So this was something, I would say sardonic humor. It was an irony that people who practice non-violence exploited their fellow beings. So this is, it took a long time for him to understand. He had he went back to Africa again and again he experienced the same thing. And I would say his journey to non-violence, his understanding of non-violence, it was progressive. It was not static. It was not confined to one point in his life, and he kept on trying to grow from one point to another, from one experience to another. Thus, I would say the method of Satyagraha, it evolved, it was a confluence of ideas borrowed from his readings of the European writers, especially Leo Tolstoy, Ruskin, and others also, and he tried to understand the Indian political too. So, his theory of non-violence, it was not built in one day. As he called his autobiography Experiment in Truth. So he constantly experimented with the idea and technique of non-violence until he had been able to understand it. So today's that is peace efforts of Gandhi. Now, peace efforts of Gandhi also, or his theory of pacifism or pacifist movement, it was not developed from one experiment, it was not developed in a day, but it was a process of constant growth itself. He was rather cold to the Jain doctrine of non-violence, but I could very well relate to the Gujarati term satyagrah. Satya means truth, agra means insistence on truth. He felt, experience that truth is uh, is something that he would understand. If he say God is truth, people would not understand because some people may not believe in God or maybe different perception of God. So his perception, he tried to make it more practical, which was nearer to the experience of the people. Thus, what he did was that he turned own theory upside down and he began to say not God is truth, but truth is God. It was still thought that perhaps if he was flexible in his approach, if he tried to understand according to the perception of the people, so he had really to enter the mind of the heart of in order to convince them that this was truth. And for him, experiment with truth also meant, also implied experiments with non and also ultimately leading to his theory of pacifism. So I would say that Mahatma Gandhi's journey, uh, the journey or development of non-violence or pacifism, it had it was an amalgamation of various influences he had fed into Gandhi's understanding of ahimsa. Since nobody knew about absolute truth and individuals should be uh, should go one by one, not by infliction of suffering on the others, on oneself. So self-suffering for him was the starting point which could make people understand, which had made him understand what is really non-violence. So non-violence, the second thing which is important is, I think we can see in practical life also that non-violence not weapon of the weak. It is better to be than cowardly. And some people found contradictions in Gandhi's notion of non-violence because, uh, because they were puzzled by the fact that Gandhi sometimes would say that you could be violent, you could in a situation, and you could not be violent in another situation. For example, uh, he said he approved of the violent resistance of the Polish people in 1939 because while the violence was only when Hitler did not understand non-violence. So in the colonial India, non-violence had strong tactical advantage for putting the British in a defensive position and thus counter-violence by the thing that their perception. For example, always his contestation with the military who initially did indulge in violence or who it's violence or the death for making the death. But they turn to Gandhi's notion of non-violence ideological propaganda itself. Applicability of non-violence as absolute virtue did not resonate with Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was a great admirer of Gandhi, but did not agree that white people in South Africa would understand the morality of the struggle for democratic rights. Now, another important point in this connection is that non-violence can be practiced against an adversary who understand or who would have the same or they would have the same kind of experiences or they would have the same kind of ideology. I agree with Gandhi that British had the same kind of ideology because they had used might in order to conquer the other countries and imperialism was itself. So, what I'm trying to stress is that non-violence was was a practice which did not suddenly come fruition, but it evolved very gradually. And now I would like to come to satyagraha. Now, another important thing which strikes me really about Gandhi is that it was believed in dialogue protest. That is one thing and also had to explain that there was a constant dialogue between two opponents or between two persons also, two ideologies also, as every day we see the farmers protest. This is one way of being non-violent, which might use other tactics also, manipulations too, but still try to be non-violent. And that is the same technique of civic resistance developed by Gandhiji. These were based on dialogic protest. Uh, his book, his seminal book, Hind Swaraj, which was published in 1909, it had the dialogue between two persons who explained ideas and the process of convincing each other or, through argument that went on and on various issues. So, what is important is that Gandhiji believed that it was not, I would say, imposition of one's own ideas, imposition of one's own practice, which is important. So, similar thing happens when we talk about his theory of pacifism, the movement, or the pacifist movement itself. Because, he civil resistance. Because though it was developed by Gandhiji, it became a central feature of Indian politics itself. For example, in 1941, the Gurdwara keys affair, it just denotes like Akali. They had practiced non-violence and that they had won against the unstable Gurdwara. Similarly, Pashtuns of the North West Frontier Province, they launched a series of under the leadership of Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and thus they were able to win against the other party or the violent people. And so that similarly, there is another third example, Vacant Satyagraha in Kerala, where the untouchables wanted to do a road which was near the temple, and they also had one, or they had pursued, had also uh, successfully against through their non-violent protest itself. Now, we the main theme, uh, Gandhi and the pacifist movement itself. Gandhian techniques of satyagraha, that is non-violence, are of central importance in the development of modern pacifism, which stands for a principled rejection of the use of all levels of politics. Uh, what does pacifist mean? Pacifist means calls for peaceful methods rather than war, and it was a rejection of violence itself, which was important or which was really central point. This emerged in the West as a full-fledged doctrine in 1930. It originated in protests against the military-industrial complex during the First World War. After the war protesters failed to see Gandhi as a shining example of pacifism in action, and he appears on the world stage as a right psychological moment. I don't know whether Michael can show some pictures because of South Africa and other pictures also, that is in India, that Gandhi was having on many mass movements, beginning from foreign sector to non-cooperation and the march, and also the Quit India movement. There, Gandhiji has strictly adhered to non-violence, and where non-violence was disrupted, then he joined the movement itself. So it was a psychological experiment. It was psychological pressure and it required very hard training. Whenever Gandhiji had, uh, I would say, withdrew the movement, then he went to the ashram. It's very interesting. It's very difficult to understand. But Gandhi, to himself, who called himself a non-violent practitioner of non-violence, but he had organized his followers in a very disciplined manner. So then he was almost militant. That is, he believed in and organized them in a military fashion, in a very disciplined manner. But this kind of military discipline, he thought was essential for pursuing his goal of pacifism itself. So Gandhiji appears on the world stage at the right psychological moment. He struck a chord with the generation which was sick of war, which demanded peace itself, and I could discuss two issues on this trading and chemical role. One was the anti-war sentiment. Those people had said that Gandhiji himself had participated in the recruitment campaign during the First World War. soldiers during the Boer War that also again helped up. So many people thought that there was inconsistency in Gandhiji's pursuit of pacifism. And when one Indian brought to Gandhiji's notice that there was carnage in the course of the First World War, how can Gandhi say that he was pursuing non-violence or he was this devotee or he was a supporter of pacifism itself? Then he said, I'm sorry, it was an error. I believe Woodward who said that this war would end all war. So Gandhiji was constantly experimenting. That is what I want to underline, that his theory of non-violence or his techniques of techniques of non-violence, these were not really hard uh, things, these were flexible things you with experience. He inspired a number of prominent personalities who saw the application of the principles to international conflicts and promote peace pacifist movement itself. A central figure in the emergence of the pacifist movement was the Dutch and Dutch syndicalist, and his name was Bartleby Liggett, and he died in 1938. He was a Christian priest, and he was imprisoned by the Dutch government because he had protested against the First World War for making anti-war speeches. He was not supported by uh, his own people, and not even the church itself. So, he was disillusioned with Christianity, and he became active in the other movements. And then I would say that he was not the only person. There were others also. All of us have heard the name Richard Craig. He was an American, and he had he was Paris-based, and he was also anti-war. And he had started a group or an organization and that it was against the international warfare, and he wrote a book, Conquest of Violence. So what I'm trying to stress is that Gandhiji had an ideological appeal to many people, and they became his followers. They came all the way from their own countries in order to meet Gandhiji, to understand him, to study his movement, not the movement, and the practice, and they went all the way. And also, Gandhi also had very in certain ways. Gandhiji was bored with people who speak with him. He always enjoyed talking to people who were who questioned him, who constantly hammered him with their ideologies, and he had to talk to them. I remember I called something Vikram Sahani, whose elder brother Balraj Sahani. He had visited the Sabarmati ashram, and then he was really struck at the fact that anybody could come. Gandhiji's life was an open thing, and he would have his bath. He would talk to people. Anybody go to him, talk to him. So, and Balraj Sahani, who was a non-vegetarian and he was a hard drinker also, he found it fascinating that in Gandhiji's ashram, and Gandhiji, who was an ascetic, and still he would allow all kinds of come and meet him, foreigners, his ashram, stay there, talk to him, and their lifestyle was absolutely different. And another interesting thing about Gandhiji is that he did not like people who always he never wanted to be the founder of a cult. He never wanted that people should worship him. Gandhiism. One at one of the public functions, some people were shouting, "Gandhi is Gandhiism," and so on and so forth. So Gandhiji said, "Yes, you can say so because I don't propagate any ism. I have no ideology itself, and thus, you can propound your own theories, your own ideas, but you have to convince me." That is important for him. That he had to do that. So another interesting thing about Gandhi was that uh, he would he always walked. Walking was his favorite, and I wouldn't say pastime, but he wanted to get away from the industrial times. He wanted to have the natural time, that is which is really, which is good for people, which people enjoy their daily life. Now, in America, also, apart from his Greg, there were some people who really felt inspired by him, and also these people followed Gandhi, but they did not follow his lifestyle. For example, Martin Luther King Jr. He had led against racial inequality, and also Malcolm X, he also led the mass movement against racial inequality. And all these people were inspired by Gandhi. So what I'm trying to stress is that Gandhi had really inspired a number of people, number of people, not only in their personal lifestyle, but also to take up the causes against and the inequalities and the war, anti-war campaign which they had propped up or which they had supported. And next important constituent of Gandhiji's pacifism was about his anti-nuclear theology. Now, Gandhiji, why did Gandhiji became anti-nuclear, or why did he say so? And one important interesting thing about this that Gandhiji's reaction when he heard of American bombing of Hiroshima, and he felt so disturbed. He said, "I could not move a muscle when I heard about the bombing of Hiroshima itself, and I was not just afraid of bombing, but I thought, how could human beings really resort to this kind of action or killing others?" And then he tried to life also. Gandhi thinking about atom bomb had emerged from his holistic view of life and his faith in striving to produce a blend of all cultures. He tried to analyze it. Why does it happen? Why nations were so insecure? Why were they so aggressive? So imperialism, uh, he thought was at the root of it, and he analyzed it uh, from a point of view that is individual. People we have what we call devil in us and the angel in us. So sometimes angel comes up, sometimes the devils come up. So he felt that culture is actually ambivalent. And he also said, "I don't want my house to be walled in on all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the whole land to be blown about my house as freely as possible." That is, have an open mind. And then he analyzed what was the root cause of violence, and therefore of all compounds, whether conventional or nuclear. That is the It is because of a disorder or disharmony which is inherent in human uh, life and self-ignorance itself, and that is why the human society has tragically overemphasized material and physical life. Again, I would draw your attention to a short book that is Deep Swaraj, where he expresses his abhorrence or rather antipathy towards industrialization and competition. And he, according to his analysis, that is
Hello?
Sir, I think that some connection problem has cropped up.
Again?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, I would.
Sir, just wait.
Hmm?
I think sir, madam is trying. Maybe some of the network problem is going on. Oh,
Again problem?
but madam will join two ID, but one ID is muted. Madam, you mute you.
Again, the
Is it
mute.
okay? Is it okay?
Yeah. What you can continue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now you just
We can only
we have a chance to speak, huh? So I would request you to wind up at this stage.
Okay.
Uh, okay, thank you. Thank you for giving us your knowledge on this subject. I have gathered all your points. When I get chance to say a few things, I'll say that. May I now request the second speaker?
Can I?
Yeah, we got your points. Okay.
No. Can I take 5 minutes to conclude?
Oh, okay, you carry on.
Can I take 5 minutes?
Conclude.
Pardon?
You conclude now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Gandhiji showed us the way how to deal with the nuclear crisis, and that unless we evolve a united culture, it is not possible for us to get rid of armament and also nuclear. And the last sentence I would say, is man ethically fit for the boundaries of science? He called it diabolical use of science, what happened in Hiroshima itself. So the intellectual foundations for the diversity of collective way of life and also diversity of international order. These are the only alternative for us. The Gandhi's non-violence is the recognition of the acceptance of diversity of opinions and culture. So his doctrine of non-alignment is in political field and equal respect for all religions in the socio-cultural space is from his theory of non-violence. So we have to choose today between Adam and Ahimsa. In fact, we have no such choice today. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry for all the disruption and non-connectivity. And we are the slaves of technology. In fact.
Not your
Thank you so
fault.
much for the-
It's a technical fault that has robbed us of your further comment. But at this stage, unless I invite Professor Mukherjee to carry on with this discussion, I
Okay.
switch over to Professor Sumit Mukherjee of Kalyan University to carry on this
Okay.
theme of peace effort. You please hang on. There may be some questions later on. Okay.
Sir, unmute your speaker. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Can you hear me? I hope my voice is not breaking. Because
No, nothing is happening.
okay, thank you.
Your voice is not breaking.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Khalid, for giving me this opportunity to share with you all my views on Mahatma Gandhi, whose 158th anniversary celebrations are in progress now. And this is my first public oration on Mahatma Gandhi. It happens to be a webinar rather than a seminar in view of the diabolical pandemic which has engulfed us. I believe it is now gradually, I think the intensity of the pandemic has been slightly reduced. Had it not been so, then I was actually supposed to have delivered this lecture last year, possibly on the 28th of April, if I remember properly, in Dr. Pali's Authors Research Institute. That did not materialize, but I was destined to deliver it here at the Institute of Historical Studies, of which Dr. Pali is the director. Now, this webinar is on Gandhi and peace. So ever since peace studies emerged as an academic discipline and advanced with gigantic strides, Gandhian studies of the linkage, the integral, I repeat, not tangential, of Gandhian studies with peace studies became increasingly apparent. And so far as peace research is concerned, it has very strong Gandhian underpinnings. I will be sharing with you the thoughts of Johann Galtung, who is called the father of peace research, and who was decisively influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. I remember when, in the initial stages of pandemic, when the lockdown was in progress, when I used to take online classes, and one of which happened to be on Gandhi's influence on journal. I used to take classes on YouTube. I sent one recordings to Dr. Pali. He was very impressed with it. He said that he immensely liked the thoughts of Johann Galtung. And therefore, I decided to focus on Johann Galtung in today's lecture and show how he was, how his thoughts were shaped by Mahatma Gandhi. But before that, a few words on the linkage between peace studies and Gandhi's social philosophy. Now, in order to understand this, one must first of all emphasize that so far as conflict negotiation is concerned, there are two perceptions of it. One is what we call a zero-sum game, where one party wins and another party loses. But the Gandhian paradigm totally emancipates itself from this zero-sum game paradigm, which is based on a win-lose model. But for Gandhi, the Gandhian paradigm, it is a win-win model. Now, when no party loses, each party emerges victorious in its own way. So conflict resolution techniques are something more than the solution of immediate problems. The ultimate goal is societal transformation. At this stage, we go on straight away to Johann Galtung, who has himself acknowledged the strong influence of Gandhi of his thought. He says that when he was barely 17 years old, and he was then in Norway, when he heard the news of the assassination of Gandhi in the hands of Nathuram, and tears rolled down his cheek. But he didn't know what he was trying for. He didn't know what really brought tears to his eyes, but he felt very morose, plaintive, and disconsolate. So it appears that somewhere in his subconscious mind, he had imbibed and internalized the quintessence of the Gandhian message. Am I audible?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, but actually, I can hear some sound here, but I hope that is not disturbing anybody. I find some sound here. Okay, it's all right. Okay.
Clear. Audio.
Thank you, Dr. Pali. structure. So that was when Galtung was just 17 years old. So he then wanted to know, his curiosity was ignited. He wanted to know who was this Gandhi. Now, he went on to say something which I am quoting here. The image of India I love is the image of Gandhi. I know perfectly well that there are other Indians, but I love the image of Gandhi. Now, Ashish Nandi, the noted intellectual, made Galtung aware why the court proceedings against Nathuram Godse had been kept secret. The reason was that Nathuram had argued in his defense that Gandhi was a stumbling block in the way of modern India emerging on the basis of industrialization, urbanization, and a strong army. Gandhi was the sworn enemy of all that. And so, for a long time, Nathuram Godse's defense was deliberately obfuscated from the public. Ashish Nandi informed Galtung about this. Galtung then founded the Peace Research Institute of Oslo in 1959. And in 1964, he founded the Journal of Peace Research. That was the first successful outcome of his internalization of Gandhi. And one of his seminal works is Two India, Gandhi and Modern India, and Gandhi's Political Ethics. These are his seminal works on Mahatma Gandhi. And one more important milestone was his exploration of Gandhian philosophy in the Gandhian Institute of Studies in Granada, where he articulated his characterization of Gandhi as a structuralist. There he drew a clear line of demarcation between the person and the structure. His point was that violence can be both direct as well as indirect. Direct violence means what? Physical assaults, physical force, verbal violence. Sometimes verbal violence is more deadly than physical violence. Killing, torture, rape, all these things come under the category of direct violence. And what is indirect violence? Here, what Galtung and also Mahatma Gandhi described as structural violence refers to poverty, hunger, and discrimination. That is no less formidable so far as violence is concerned. Now, Galtung says that Satyagraha, Swaraj, Swadeshi, and Sarvodaya are much better approaches to the three goals of the United Nations. That is sustainable peace, development, and environment. He says that Satyagraha stands for a trinity: truth, love, and God. Swaraj stands for self-rule, being rooted, and a deepening of an anchorage, a kind of a foothold, an anchorage, being in command of identity. Swadeshi means meeting basic needs, and Sarvodaya means the uplift and amelioration of the poor. Now, as I said, that violence, according to Galtung, can be direct and indirect. And indirect violence can be both structural and cultural. In his articulation of the concept of structural violence, Galtung drew heavily from Mahatma Gandhi, whom he described as a structuralist. Now, he says that it is violence that does not hurt or kill through fists or guns, but through social structures. And what kind of social structures? Social structures that produce poverty, death, and enormous suffering. Structural violence can be politically repressive and exploitative. It occurs when the social order directly or indirectly causes human suffering and death. Now, episodes of structural violence are less perceptive. Why? Because they are embedded in the structure, and these structures are inherently exploitative. As they produce hunger, they produce illness. And the disempowered, disinherited, and marginalized people suffer and die in silence due to structured inequalities, local, regional, and global. And these inequalities can ignite organized armed conflict also. I can't go into this because this is a topic of much elaborate discussion. Today, when the minutes of terrorism is confronting us, I think it is definitely worthwhile subject to ponder as to how far economic deprivation is providing a fillip to terrorism. But this can't be generalized because it all depends on the situational specificities. And there is definitely one contributory cause. And I need not elaborate here, otherwise it will be digressing from the main theme of today's lecture. Now, the chronically oppressed people, it is a fact, they often resort to direct violence, and ethnic conflicts are often exacerbated by continued disparities and deprivations. Once again, I repeat, you cannot draw any generalizations from this. So, what is then cultural violence? Cultural violence refers to ideologies, convictions, traditions, and systems of legitimation through which direct or structural violence is justified. And structural inequalities become a part of the cultural mechanism. And this mechanism legitimizes the continuation of subtle violence. One example would be the superior race theory. Hitler's extermination of the Jews would be a very appropriate example of this. And cultural violence discriminates between cultural and religious beliefs, rituals, art, language. So Gandhi intuitively understood violence perpetrated by oppressive social structures and political institutions. And he was unequivocal in his affirmation that the evil lies in structure, not in the person who is carrying out his obligation. The essence of non-violence is to uproot antagonists, not to crush the antagonists themselves. Colonialism is an ideal example of structural violence. Evil is an offshoot of the social structure. Economics that is destructive of the moral well-being of the individual or the nation is essentially immoral. The political structure which is totally bereft of religion or morality cannot bring about what we call inner freedom or spiritual emancipation, dignity, and justice. So Gandhi denounced capitalism, but he did not denounce the capitalists because he was a humanist. He hated racialism, but not the white men. He was of the decided view that sheerly by replacement of the colonial white regime, the emasculated and suffering masses will not be liberated. The modern Western civilization is based on ruthless competition on the one hand and unbridled individualism on the other. Unregulated quest for consumption would divide the society and inflict irreparable psychological damage on the underprivileged. So Gandhi wanted to abolish norms and institutions that justify discrimination, exploitation, and dehumanization. His emphasis was on system-generated structural violence rather than actor-oriented direct violence. Now, he did not visualize the modern territorial state as the panacea for structural violence. His non-violent activism was based on the conception of a social order where there was no dehumanization and each was treated with dignity in the spirit of shared humanity. In the ideal society visualized by him, that society would be free from structural violence and the people would be content to fulfill basic human needs and not hanker for more. So he wanted to curb the insatiable appetite of people to ask for more and more and more. Colonialism engages not only in political and economic exploitation, but fabricates a cultural mindset conducive to the subjugation of targets. So there should be a total shift in the way we look at the concept of progress and development. Unless this happens, India would witness greater intensity of structural and cultural violence. So the concepts of Swaraj and Swadeshi propounded by Gandhi were intended to liberate the people from systemic violence. Structural violence was ingrained in the capitalist world. Non-violent social order would limit consumption as well as technology, which promoted exploitation, inequity, and centralization of power and authority.
Okay.
And the
At
last,
this stage,
huh?
I have to request you to wind up because we are left with
We
time.
started late. I'm winding up in 2 minutes. So how many minutes should I get?
2 minutes, okay?
2 minutes? Okay.
2 minutes. Okay.
So we started late. Yeah. That's
Yeah, very late.
Okay,
That's right.
okay. I got it. No, to give me 2 minutes. Okay.
2 minutes.
Now,
should do.
okay. Now, Mahatma Gandhi, this is what Johann Galtung imbibed from Mahatma Gandhi, and he founded Transcend International, which was a global network for peace, development, and environment, dedicated to bringing about more equitable and less violent world. Now, Galtung has also been criticized by Kenneth Boulding. Kenneth Boulding says that the idea of positive peace, now I don't have the time to explain just this much, negative peace means simply the absence of violence. While positive peace is a much more optimistic and a positive conception, which seeks to eliminate the root causes of violence, which has a much broader agenda. Now, Kenneth Boulding criticized this idea as utopian, and he provided an alternative of stable peace. But paradoxically, he himself drew copiously from John and Gandhi. So I wind up by saying that even today, the proliferation of literature on peace research and Mahatma Gandhi has been prodigious, and Mahatma Gandhi will be continue to provide an abiding inspiration to peace research, and Johann Galtung stands out as an ideal and appropriate illustration of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mukherjee. You have put all your bright ideas in a nutshell. Time is short, art is long. At this stage, therefore, it is my pleasure to thank both of you. And now, if there are any questions from the floor or from the subscribers to this program, we allow some more 10-15 minutes time for questions. If those who are participating would like to ask the questions to any of the speakers, then both of them will be ready to answer them. And then time for me to sum up and time to give you a vote of thanks. So for that, we have about half an hour's time. So please, those who have joined, ask your questions, shoot your questions to both the speakers, if you will. Please go ahead. Any questions anywhere? Yes? If anyone would like to ask a question, someone to begin with? Yeah? Is there anyone? Unfortunately, there's no question because, you know, there are two complete speeches with a load of ideas. Therefore, they are kept pondering and questions are not forthcoming. Anyway, if you don't have questions, we don't have time to spare. So I go into the summing up of this webinar with my own comments, and then there will be vote of thanks. Now, I heard some of them, and it's very clear that what Professor Mohan said was a historical approach, and what Professor Mukherjee said was an approach of political science. One is empirically reading, and the other person is with, the political science people do. They have theories from the beginning, and then they go on with those theories. That is the approach of these two speakers, but both are enjoyable, complementary, and thought-provoking for laymen like us. So I think that those who have joined, about 35 of them, they must have enjoyed these speeches. Now, obviously, Gandhi is inexhaustible, and it will continue because world weary. We can say that. Every day we are under the shadow of war in some form or other. If we go to structural violence, as he quoted, Mukherjee quoted from, he says Gancool, but I thought he was Gaunpule.
No, Galtung. Galtung.
G-A-L?
Galtung. Galtung.
Oh, yeah, another person, okay. Another person. Anyway, but his ideas are right, and he's saying that structural violence is very important. And people don't so much explore this idea of structural violence, because we historians, as Kamlesh has done, so I'm in the same profession, we don't go with this kind of theory, but the theories actually enlighten us a lot, because then we on to the queries of the roots of this structural violence. Then your poverty, literacy, all these things come. That is very good, and I think one should think on that line. But then what Kamlesh has said, all stages have been said. Gandhi's non-violence, non-cooperation, civil disobedience, all these basic ideas. In Swaraj, she also mentioned that. Racism in the beginning, racism later. She also mentioned that. Also brought the corrective from Richard Attenborough. I was exploring Gandhi because he is the most remarkable person of the century. So Attenborough, I have read, I've seen the film. Wonderful. You have a real re-look to Gandhi if you also touch Attenborough as Kamlesh has done. So that is another kind of empirical view. Stage by stage, we empirically, through inductive logic, we come to the final conclusion. But your exercise, I mean, Professor Mukherjee, that is also very fascinating. You bring in with theories, illustrate that, and come to your conclusion. I don't think that we are hostile. We are in the same discipline. We are in the same brother. No difference. It's complementary, and I think research can be done on both sides. Particularly the ideas you have given in the second lecture, one can explore those things deeply. A lot of ideas are there. Now, when I read another book which you have not mentioned, that is Eric M. Erickson's Gandhi's Truth. There he says Gandhi's whole program was not spiritual. Gandhi's whole program was ethical, basically ethical. And when you are weaponless against powers, well-armed powers, then you have this kind of rapport. And he explained that truth is the central factor. Satyamaiva Jayate. That inspires his whole idea. And then Gandhi finds out that there is a moral fervor. There's a moral fervor, not spiritual, but moral fervor to it. And from that kind of thing emanates ideas of non-corruption, non-violence, all these ideas come. And in India's case, as she has referred to Hind Swaraj and all, in India's case, we were a disarmed people against an armed power, authority. So we really couldn't challenge that kind of power, imperial power. So we had to go through the other process, which is this ethical process, this moral process, and we armed with all those ideas of Satya, then Asoho Yoga, then as he gave them the idea, the civil disobedience. All are very simple things that he has mentioned, but they are created. All these are really the roadblocks to violence, roadblocks to imperialism, so many other things. And she has also mentioned, I like that very much, that he also had comments on nuclear weapons. The atom bombs that were hurled by the Americans, experimental bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ruined 2 cities, not only cities, made several generations in Japan, and that was so I think stupendous, so disturbing to all people that itself stopped any kind of war. The nuclear use of nuclear weapons stops any kind of war because that becomes the scourge of the nation. So this has to be really brought up again because now we are under the shadow of nuclear war. That's why this idea has to be expanded and written more on. Because the important thing that Gandhi has said on that. And surprisingly, day by day, all nations are having a statue of Mahatma Gandhi in their countries, everywhere. Not just South Africa, not with just Nelson Mandela, nor with King, or even, recently in the paper you saw that Gandhi statue was also there in Hyde Park recently. So, because that is the one alternative to the devastating war all over the world, all kinds of structural violence or non-structural. It is pervading the entire world in every way. Right now we are in the throes of so many local wars, and both are simultaneously being done, haunting us. Gandhi becomes therefore more and more relevant. I personally, as a veteran historian, have enjoyed both the talks in their respective ways. They are very thought-provoking. Though I have one book on Gandhi and several other articles, but then I now understand that it is far from exhaustive for me. I may be provoked to, if I have energy left, I'll be provoked to write on Gandhi from these directives, these principles. Thank you very much indeed, both the speakers, for joining in this program, the first webinar after the pandemic. This body was defunct, Institute of Historical Studies, 60 years old. So many programs, not only India, but abroad, so many members are there. And suddenly there was no activity. You have given us that activity. Next month, beginning next month, we also start the office. I am myself preparing to go to the office on 1st February itself, and more programs will come. So thank you very much once again, and I now request our PRO, Aborno Chatterjee, to come up for a formal vote of thanks. Aborno.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the Institute of Historical Studies, I would like to thank the keynote speaker of this national webinar to commemorate the 158th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, Professor Kamlesh Pahar, retired Professor Emeritus of History, Punjab University. Madam, your speech was truly thought-provoking, and your speech has opened up new dimensions in the research regarding Mahatma Gandhi. And the topic of this webinar is Peace Efforts of Gandhi. And many historians, scholars have defined this subject from different angles. Madam, your speech has opened up new dimensions. You spoke about Gandhi's association with great foreign scholars and intellectuals, including Nelson Mandela, who is called the Mabida in South Africa. And he also spoke about Gandhi's various movements, non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience movement, and how he was thrown out of jail in South Africa. Madam, we really enjoyed your speech, And on behalf of the Institute, I thank you for your thought-provoking lecture. Now, I also want to thank the second speaker of this national webinar, Professor Shubham Mukherjee. Sir, you are our old-time friend and scholar. You have defined another dimension of Mahatma Gandhi, and your speech is also very enlightening. I want to thank you, sir. Your talk has also opened up another aspect of Gandhi's thoughts. Uh, so I think that this will help the young research scholars and researchers in their research, and it will go a long way in redefining Gandhi in a new way. On behalf of the Institute, I also want to thank the chairman of this session, our honorable director, Professor Chitta Palit, who has summed up the proceedings of this session in a beautiful manner. Sir has said that it's really high time to think the uh, uh, points mentioned by speakers in their lectures, and really when we are uh, facing such difficult times, uh, the scourge of war, the scourge of terrorism is haunting us. So in this situation, really, the Gandhi's message is all pervasive, and Gandhi's message of non-violence is really we have to think about it, and we have to follow his ideas. On behalf of the Institute of Historical Studies, I also like to thank the government of West Bengal, the Department of Higher Education government of West Bengal. Actually, as they know that this was supposed to be a physical seminar. Due to pandemic, we could not do it. We are sorry. We apologize to the audience. We couldn't do it earlier. The pandemic has engulfed us in such a big manner that we were out of the world, but still we are returning to normalcy, and we are in the new normal situation. And thanks to the initiative of the honorable director, that we are being able to hold this national webinar.
And please don't forget to thank Dr. Mansoor Ahmad.
I would like to I would like to thank the Department of Higher Education Government of West Bengal, who has funded us for holding this seminar. Now it is a national webinar, but actually this was supposed to be a physical seminar. On behalf of the Institute of Physical Studies, I would like to want to thank all the participants, the distinguished guests, the scholars, the students who have joined this national webinar. The members of the institute also who have joined this webinar. Without the participation of the audience, we couldn't do anything, and they are the source of inspiration for us. Last but not the least, I shall be failed in my duty if I don't thank my colleagues who have helped me in organizing this seminar. In fact, we together has worked as a team to make this webinar a success. Last but not the least, I'd like to thank Dr. Sheikh Rahman, Sheikh staff who has helped us in, uh, in organizing this national webinar. Without their support and help, it would have been difficult for us to organize national webinar. Before concluding my vote of thanks, I would like to announce next program. The next program is H.L. Gupta Endowment Lecture. It will be held on 27th of February 2021 at 3 p.m. and it would now divulge into another sphere of history. You would hear about Bhagavati Baul and her associates, which is a subject of music. And I think musicologists, music scholars, and researchers would enjoy this subject. Not only musicians, but also all of you would enjoy this subject. And the speaker is Professor Shrutapa Shrikupta of Korean University. She will speak on this subject, and Professor Zapati Shrikupta, another very eminent academician, would recite the discussion. And we would shortly announce whether it will be a physical lecture or it will be held online. That will be intermediated to the uh, audience, the members, and the guests very shortly. So, with these words, I would like to thank all of you for joining this session. I'd like to thank the speakers, the chairman, and with these words, I end my vote of thanks here. Thank you.
Thank you. The meeting is closed now here.